It is a great pleasure to be back here in Emporia. I always love coming here, love the facility, love the food that we have, and everything is great. I'm going to just briefly talk about our annual housing forecast that we just released, and then I'm going to call up some local professionals to talk about what's going on specifically in the Emporia area housing market. But before I call them up, you should have at your tables now a copy of our Lyon County Housing Outlook, something that we prepare. And I have to give a thanks to the Kansas Association of Realtors and all of the realtor boards across the state, including the Sunflower Realtors, of which the local real estate agents in the Emporia area are members of the Sunflower Board. We've had a partnership with them for almost 15 years now, where we access the local MLS statistics. We're able to prepare monthly statistical reports for the local boards. And so we provide that service for them, but then that also gives us access to be able to do our annual forecast. So we're very grateful for that, that partnership that we've had over the years. You've talked today about the labor market. You've talked about inflation. When I do our annual housing forecast, I always look at two fundamentals: the labor market, what's happening there, and then what's happening in terms of the financing market. Obviously, we're in a lot of turmoil, much more uncertainty than we've had in recent years. And if you actually look at the graph of mortgage rates that you see in your chart, mortgage rates have gone up almost another 100 basis points now from when we had to go to press with this. I think yesterday I saw that it was at 6.9%, something like that was the latest 30-year fixed mortgage rate. I did double check. The Mortgage Bankers Association is the forecast for the 30-year fixed mortgage rate that we use as saying what will happen going forward. And when we went to print, their forecast was that the 30-year fixed mortgage rate by next year would fall down to 4.8%. So they were forecasting a decline next year when we went to print. Right now, they've raised that forecast, but it's still only 5%. And that's the number that you see here. 5% interest rate is where they forecast mortgage rates to be in the coming year. And there's been a lot of talk about inflation, and the only thing that I will add to that is that I think that is reflecting, and there are other measures that are reflecting in financial markets, that investors seem to believe that inflation will be brought under control. That forecast of a 5% 30-year fixed mortgage rate next year has to be associated with much lower headline inflation numbers than we're seeing now. If inflation does not come down, then we should expect to see mortgage rates be significantly higher than that. But as I said, I work with their forecast and say that's one piece I'm not going to try and do. It's hard enough to forecast one thing, let alone multiple. Well, what's been happening in the Emporia area with home sales? One of the things that I did this year with our housing forecast is, and the presentations I've done, is I've been trying to present a much broader picture of not just the past 2 years or 3 years, but where have we been over the last 10, 15, 20 years, or even longer. And as you can see, for a long time, Emporia, and this is all of Lyon County that we have here. Emporia has been hovering around 40 home sales a month for a long period of time. It dropped slightly below that in 2017, 2018. And since 2020, that number has gone up. And to go up from 40 to, say, 45 homes a month, that's actually a pretty substantial increase in home sales activity here. We are forecasting generally for the state that home sales activity will decline. And that is primarily because of supply constraints. The issues that we've seen across most of the state has not been, even prior to the onset of the pandemic, the issue was a lack of inventory available for sale. And that was true not only in the large markets, it's been also true across most of the smaller micropolitan area markets in the state. This is just one way of getting at that issue. And we're asking a question: what fraction of homes that are available that have sold sold at a discount to their original asking price. So we all know real estate transactions tend to be a negotiation. You might ask $150,000 for your home, and that's your list price. And then a buyer comes in, and it's not uncommon for them to say, oh, well, let's offer 140. And then maybe you end your negotiations at 145,000. Well, that's a discount compared to the original listing price. Historically, you see the darker line is Kansas, and the lighter line, the blue line, is Lyon County. And in Lyon County, you would typically have about 90% of homes that would sell at a discount from that original list price. That's a little higher than we see in Kansas. And that over the past 10 years, say start in about 2013, we've seen how that percentage of homes selling at a discount has gotten slightly smaller. Prior to the pandemic, Emporia was sitting at about 80% of homes selling at a discount. Now that would mean that 20% of the homes sold at a sale price that was at or higher than the list price, okay? Then you see 2020, and those numbers begin to plummet. And that really reflects the incredibly strong demand that was created by the policy responses to the pandemic. It happened everywhere because it were very national factors. When we went into the pandemic, we thought that perhaps we would see a decline in demand for home sales, that people would be fearful, they would think that their employment was in jeopardy, and so forth. But it turned out as we moved into the pandemic, several things happened that had the opposite effect. First of all, the households that are most likely to be home buying households were the least likely to lose their jobs. They were the most likely to be able to pivot and work from home. On the other hand, if you worked in a job where you had to be physically present to work, then you were more likely to lose your job, less likely to want to buy. But those were households that were more likely to be renters in the first place. So number two, as we talked about, we all got stimulus checks. Right? So even if we weren't laid off, we got several rounds of stimulus from the federal government. Number three, we got all this extra money, but we couldn't go out and spend it. We couldn't go out to eat, we couldn't travel, things that we might do with surplus income, we could not spend it on. And so as a result, a lot of households got their finances in really good order. Lots of savings, paying down debt, and so forth. Number four, we're all sitting around looking at our same four walls. And I think we all got a little bit cabin fever, right? We're tired of looking at these four walls, and all of a sudden we're starting to think about what we wish we had instead. And then number five, mortgage rates dropped to the absolute lowest level that they have ever been. And those five factors combined to, instead of demand going down when we hit the pandemic, it really just ignited demand in a market where we already were short of enough homes available for sale. And so you can see right here how statewide, but also in Lyon County, there was a significant drop in the number of homes that were sold at a discount from the original asking price. I'll show another picture on prices here in a minute, but inventories of homes available for sale. I've shown this before. We usually think of a balanced market as being between a 4 and a 6 month supply of homes available for sale. Well, the Emporia area, it's the darker blue line that tracks along with Kansas there. And you can see that prior to the pandemic, we were sitting at maybe a 2.5 month supply. That's the definition of a seller's market prior to the stimulus and demand. Then when we had all the extra demand from the pandemic responses, you can see month supply dropped down into to 1 month supply and even lower. An incredibly tight inventory. And that's what led to a number of the bidding war situations and the other things that resulted in really dramatic home price increases. So this is median sale prices of homes in Emporia. And you can see that after bouncing around at about $75,000, $80,000 a year, $80,000 median sale prices, that had been going up even prior to the onset of the pandemic. And some of that is newer homes that have a little bit larger size, higher value, but a lot of it was underlying home price appreciation. That then just in 2020 continued to accelerate. I don't have a good number for a true underlying home price appreciation for Emporia per se, but across the state of Kansas, average home prices increased about 17% through the second quarter of this year compared to the prior year. Now that's slowed. As mortgage rates have gone up, we've seen that pace of appreciation slow, but it's not going to go to a place where we will see substantial price declines. And the reason I say that is because we still have a shortage of inventory. So our home price appreciation forecast, this is our total forecast for Kansas. We think we'll end the year in Kansas up over 12% with average home price appreciation. Again, that's down from about 17% earlier in the year. Next year, we think home price appreciation will slow to 5.4%. That is a really good, strong, normal appreciation rate for Kansas. And I think the point that I want you to take away from is even if we have a pretty substantial drop in demand, which I think we're seeing, because we have supply issues that continue, that started long before the pandemic, we're going to continue to see some of the pressures on prices in the housing market that aren't going to ease in the immediate future. Jeremy, I think, gave a most likely and a worst case scenario, kind of an upper and a lower. This would be what we would have had our most likely. If I had a worst case scenario, it would be for home price appreciation in Kansas to drop down to, say, the 1.5% to 2% range. Again, nothing where we would see substantial declines, despite some of the chicken littles that you may be hearing on that national media. Now, I would note, you may say, well, they may be right with respect to national averages, but we didn't see big price drops even in the wake of the financial crisis because our housing markets tend to be much more level and steady. So, with that, I would like to bring up our panelists. We have two great panelists. We had them here last year, and we'd like to share them with you again. Jamie Sauder has been in the real estate industry since October of 2005. He began his career as a sales associate and for his first 6 years, and then he opened the Emporia Realty Group, an independent real estate sales firm. He served as supervising broker there since 2011. In 2016, ERG affiliated with Coldwell Banker and became Coldwell Banker Emporia Real Estate. He's also the co-founder and owner of ERG Property Management, a full-service commercial and residential property management firm. Over his career, he's been involved in both residential and commercial transactions, residential construction, residential development, and is more recently a part of an ownership group that established the first residential housing incentive district for an upper-story commercial district development in the state of Kansas. He was recently installed as the first vice president and treasurer of the Kansas Association of Realtors, and he's the current chairman of the Regional Development Association of East Central Kansas, and he serves on the Emporia City Commission. Please join me in welcoming Jamie Sauder. We also have with us today Jeff Williams. He's an associate broker and co-owner of Eck Real Estate with offices in Emporia and Topeka. Jeff grew up in Emporia and attended Emporia State University and graduated from K-State. He's a past president of the Emporia Board of Realtors and served on the Sunflower Board of Realtors, was the MLS board chairman as well as the risk management chair. He served on the United Way Board and is committee chairman for Boy Scouts and serves on the Joint Economic Development Advisory Council. Jeff is past president of the Chamber and is currently president of the Emporia Community Foundation and the Emporia Enterprises Boards. So join me in welcoming Jeff Williams as well. Well, gentlemen, one of the things that I showed here is that home sales had been up here the last couple of years, but just recently they've started to tail off. Jamie was giving me kind of a second up, or Jeff was giving me just a second little update on some things there. But we started to see some changes in home sales activity. To the extent that home sales are declining right now, how much of that would you attribute to softening of demand? And how much of it would you attribute to simply the lack of inventory that's available for sale? So, Jeff, you want to take it first?
Well, I was just mentioning to Stan. Can you hear me, by the way? Am I talking loud enough? Okay. Got a little bit of a head cold, or ear infection, so I apologize. I can hear it in my head twice. So, I was just sharing with Stan that last year at this time to this date, we'd sold 352 houses. And the last month and a half, we've had a pretty good surge because people started to worry interest rates were going up, and there was pretty high demand to get something while they could, I think. So everything's about 2 months behind in our industry, so I think it'll go back down, but we're currently at 340, so we're 12 short. Our office is closing 6 deals today. I bet your office is closing a few too, middle of the month. So we're probably even right now, but I expect that to drop again. And to answer your question, because of supply. We currently don't have the houses to sell. Out of those 6 we're selling today, about half of those at least were, would you sell your house?
I'll just touch on that because I was looking at the numbers that came out. This is Lyon County, all of Lyon County. Last month, at the end of last month, there were 25 homes listed in the entire county available for sale. At September of 2021, at the same month, there were 43 homes listed available for sale. That's down 41.9% compared to last year. Compared to 2020, there were 51 homes available for sale. That was a 15.7% decline. So we went down from basically half as many homes available for sale now as there were 2 years ago.
And as of today, there are 15 for sale.
Okay, you've just taken some of those off the market. Very good. Jamie, what would you like to share?
Yeah, I think for a while we have, our sales activity has been dictated primarily by people who had to move, who not necessarily capitalized. I mean, there were a significant number capitalizing on opportunity, the low rates, but with the rise in values going up as sharply as rates were low, there weren't near as many that were taking advantage of rates. And so our market has been driven very much by people that have to move. And I think a lot of that has to do with, and I don't know how long this goes back, but the nature of our large scale employment. We've been we've not had a lot of growth in our population locally, but we have a lot of people that come in and go out due to the nature of their employment and transferring and so on and so forth. And so we see a lot of that. And so I think with a lot of people who haven't bought though in the last 5 years have refinanced. And I think that will continue to exacerbate the problem though as well.
So when you say exacerbate the problem, you're talking then a question that we've had a lot of people ask, and I didn't have this, I gave them a bunch of softball questions for our panel, and this one wasn't on it, but I think you're leading to it, which is to what extent will people who either purchased or refinanced over the last few years with the incredibly low interest rates, will that serve as a lock-in and therefore limit, in some ways, both demand and supply, because they won't be buying a new move-up house, but they also won't be putting their home on the market as their existing home. To what extent do you see that happening?
So Emporia, and I don't know, my first boss in this business had a stat that he used, and I don't know if it was factual or not, but I've always just kind of hung my hat on it, is that the average Emporian moved every 2 to 5 years. And I don't know if that's quantifiable or not, but it should slow that down. And I think, which to me puts more pressure on the community to add new options into our inventory.
Because they're not putting their home back on the market, making it available for somebody else.
Yeah.
Jeff?
Well, the other problem there is I have personally at least a dozen people I could call today if I had a house for them to buy that would wait until they sell their house. Mm-hmm. But the chances of them putting theirs on the market because there's nothing out there and then finding a house that will wait on them are about zero, because in June and July, I had 5 full price offers. One was at, everything else was above asking price. I do not recommend this, I hate this, but they were willing, all 5 were willing not to do inspections.
And that was
As
even in
is.
June and July, after
June and
rates
July,
started going.
yeah, in June and July, and I got none of those through because they all got outbid or there was a better bid than that. Cash or pre-approved with a loan ready to go, no contingencies.
So let me see if I can follow up on that one. Again, you guys lead me in places where I want to go, but didn't necessarily prepare you for. One of the defining features of the housing market last year and this spring was the incredible multiple offer, above asking price, waive everything type situations was happening in every market across the state. To what extent, as you see kind of where your buyers and sellers are right now, mortgage rates have no more than doubled since we were there back at that point in time, that pressure bidding war mentality, how does it compare to where we were 6 months or a year ago? But then also, how does it compare to where we would have been back in 2019?
So we've always been a market where there always seems to be a pocket of buyers for just about every house. And obviously the closer you get to the median price range, the bigger that pocket gets. Mm-hmm. And so from where I sit, the strategy is still circles around price and condition. It needs to be, we are, for the longest time, well, I say it seems like a long time. The last 2 years have seemed like the longest time. We would go into interviews with sellers and our message was, well, it doesn't matter what we think, it matters what you want to price it at. Because ultimately it's their choice, but they didn't care what we thought. Because they thought we would lowball them to get an easier deal anyway. But we are slowly migrating back to where price and condition are the relevant factors on creating that situation. And if the buying pool is smaller because rates are higher and so on, well, the inventory is proportional to that right now. At least I would argue that it is. Mm-hmm. And so that you still have those pockets of buyers. And so what we're seeing now with listings that our current active inventory, I think, has like 61 days average, and our sold inventory is about 20 days on the market. And so I noticed this yesterday when I was looking, I saw more price reductions in one day yesterday than I think I've seen cumulatively for the year. And we only have 31, or I think 15 in Emporia, 31 in the countywide. So price and condition and getting back to some of the basics that how we deal with customers is what will become more and more important as we move forward.
Very good. Jeff?
Yeah, I had the same statistic. Actually, it was for the year, our average days on market was 17. Of the homes that are on the market right now, they've been on the market 62 days. So there's a disconnect there with those people that are on the market realizing things changed. And it changed the minute, for me personally, when I saw it was when we were still in the 4s, people thought, well, that's not bad. Mm-hmm. But as soon as it got to 5, we hit a brick wall. And when it got to 6, people started getting scared. And now that we're knocking on the door of 7, people are like, oh my gosh, what are we gonna do? But you're talking to a guy here that's old enough. I paid points for my first loan to get it down to 8.5, and my parents paid 14 to 15% for their first. And historically, if you talk to the people at the National Association of Realtors, we're still in a sweet spot.
Right.
Well, when you're at 3, that's what you remember. You don't remember the 18, you remember the 3.
Yeah, and to your point, I think I had this conversation with somebody last week at the car conference. You have to talk relativity. When I talk to, I don't want to lump you in as being way older than me, but you're a little bit older than me. We talk about how good of a deal 6.5% is. Well, to someone who entered into the housing market or entered into adulthood or postgraduate life at 4%, 6.5 is a lot. But if you're talking to a generation that cut their teeth at 18%, 6.5 is a deal. So it depends on who your audience is a little bit too.
Right, right. Well, how are prospective buyers then responding? Those who maybe don't have the historic perspective to think that 6.5% is a deal. How are those buyers responding, and how are sellers responding in response to these increased mortgage rates?
I mean, I personally think we're still dealing with a backlog of buyers that are either in rentals or have to find something, and so there's still a little bit of urgency on buyers' parts. I think we won't really know the answer to that until we see what happens, one, with inventory, and two, with rates.
Okay.
And what always happens is, like any other business, the houses that are in good shape, that are really well maintained and taken care of, and their roof and their gutters and their foundation, everything's okay, those are still gonna sell.
Mm-hmm.
People want those houses, and they'll pay a little extra still for those houses. Unfortunately, the age of a lot of our houses in Emporia, a lot of them were built more than 50, 60, 70 years ago. And those are the ones with the foundation issues, which the thing that exasperates that, and Jamie and all of us in the real estate industry have been worried about this for years. We didn't have enough foundation people. We don't have enough electricians. We don't have enough plumbers to even do the inspections. Now, if you got a problem, you're calling Wichita or Kansas City and getting on a list is months long to get it taken care of. So that's really hurting those folks in those homes as well. And they've got to come up with that money. So it just compounds itself in a market like this.
Well, one way to deal with the lack of supply is to build more new homes. What is Emporia doing? What are projects that are happening? How is the city doing in terms of making that happen to have the housing available that you need? And you don't have to limit to Emporia, the surrounding area. Some people come all the way in from, did you say Montgomery County? Greenwood County. So, so go ahead.
Well, there's a lot of ways to answer that. I mean, I'm of the opinion that we're still not doing enough, but we have a lot of limiting factors. Cost of labor, cost of goods makes it incredibly expensive for what is affordable for our market, and so it makes it challenging on where you can build and what you can build. But on the other side of that, I'm not a member of the Optimist Club, but I do have a glass that's half full. I think rates being higher, I think that presents an opportunity. If it causes a slowdown in other markets, I think it's a time to try to move forward with projects. I think about I had a conversation with a guy yesterday about some investments that I made after the Great Recession, and some properties that we got into that have become happy accidents, and we were able to make them work at 7%, mm-hmm. and we were able to have our margins be okay enough that we didn't lose on them, and then once rates came down, we were able to refinance, and now they're terrific investments. And I think if we're able to put forward some housing stock that's new, that is attainable, and people have to get into it at 6%, 6.5%, and are able to afford it when things do come down, as our friends at the Mortgage Bankers Association have promised us, that they'll be even more affordable and become better investments. But I think one of the things, and I said this last year, our town, we have a terrible history of being reactionary to opportunity instead of getting out in front of it. And I still think we have time Chuck, if I say too much, throw something at me, but we have some significant economic development opportunity in front of us. What we have to do are take the steps to differentiate ourselves from the other communities that are competing for the same opportunities.
Jeff?
Well, I mean, just to give you an idea, the word affordable always kind of just like the hair stand up on the back of my neck, because affordable to everybody is a different word. But the problem is, a slab home that's being built right now is above $200,000. I mean, no basement, a garage, 2 or 3 bedrooms, 1 or 2 baths, $200,000, $210,000, or $250,000 is what they're selling for now. But the issue is our median price is around $142,000 this year. And we have sold more than I've ever seen, 600,000 plus homes. So we have people out there with some money. There are people that have money right now. We've sold a lot of $400,000 and $500,000 homes this year too. But on the most part, we have a lot of homes that are under $100,000 in this area. And that's what brings that median price down. But Right now, I checked yesterday again, and right now there is one house on the market between 250 and 350. That might just be a low supply for that division. One house for sale, and quite frankly, it's taken two price reductions on that one that I'm talking about. There's one pending in that price range, which means for the last 2 months, we've had nothing else, that they're just all gone either. We've had nothing. 250 to 350, guys, that's a huge deficiency.
And I think that probably reflective of interest rates and just lack of people who probably have good equity in that price range, but just know where to go if they were able to sell.
Right, and exactly.
Well, we have a few minutes left here, and I'd like to open it up to the audience to questions that you may have. Joyce?
Well, Jamie brought something up years ago, realtors claimed that people changed and moved a lot in Emporia. And what I understood at the time, they were moving up in price ranges. As property values have gone up, has there been an upgrade in the how the houses are? If you have a $50,000 house, you can't put a kitchen in it. The kitchen's going to cost too much
more
to
than the house.
upgrade. So has the housing stock improved somewhat because people didn't move?
So that increase in median sale price that we saw, how much of that do you think is due to underlying appreciation versus people making the housing better so that it would be worth more for the same house?
Well, you're right. We need a healthy cycle of people moving up, and your generation has ruined that for us because we don't move. You don't move. No,
22 years in a house is
it's not normal. No, there's a lot to unpack there, but I think part of adding new inventory to the market would be to help that cycle to move on. There are no shortage of people that are of the baby boomer generation. I think that in casual conversation would tell you that if I had an option that I could move into one level low maintenance, I would do it in a heartbeat. If we were able to produce that on a scale that we knew we could sell and repeat and sell and so on, it would free up the kind of inventory that could unlock a lot of where our gridlock is right now. But again, everyone, like what Jeff said, everyone's definition of affordable is different. And because of that, I guess he didn't want to hear.
Well, labor and materials costs make it
but
extremely difficult to get
I
that
have
done.
conversations with a lot of my mother's friends who say, hey, just figure out a way to get me a brand new 1,600 square feet all on one level. And if you can do that for $180,000, I'll do it. And I'm like, well, sorry, you're going to be waiting a while because that's about $350 to get into that one. So.
Other questions? Becca?
So in Madison, where I live in Greenwood County, there are roughly 50 or so decayed properties with houses that are unlivable, have back taxes and so forth. The city has been working on putting together what they're calling a land bank. And if they were to remove those houses, consolidate some of the parcels to make it bigger, and actually put houses on those properties, how likely is it that people would be willing to move to Madison from these areas because of the housing shortage? Or are people pretty resistant to that commute?
Yes.
I took that as a yes to both questions. They'd be willing to move
Well,
and they'd be resistant.
it's a great question, and the mayor of Olpe is amongst us today too. And I think that would be an initiative that would have to be taken on by the towns, that they had to decide that they wanted to attract people to their areas.
Right.
I do think the commute is
But if
something.
they did it, would it be successful?
It just depends on how it was done, what the product would be, what kind of value it offered. People are funny, and the minute you think you know what people want, they change their mind and want something different. And I do think there's tremendous opportunity in small towns, because I think whether it's through infill or even adding infrastructure, the way they go about adding infrastructure, they can do it with, so for example, if Madison wanted to put a new subdivision in, you could probably get away with putting in gravel roads, which makes the land cost and things like that cheaper. There are measures that small towns could take where they could add available places to have housing. If you're able to partner with a builder that provided some economy of scale, to where subcontractors and the labor and everything was done so where they knew they were getting paid for 5, so they gave a discount and passed that on to the consumer. I think there's opportunity there. I think it has to be done very carefully. Like the further you get away from Emporia, the more careful you'd have to be. But then it goes back to, I don't know how the internet is in Madison right now. Is there available broadband and things like that to where you can work from home or other things like that as well?
Yeah, there is.
Yeah.
You're not using outhouses. No.
Is there plumbing? You have plumbing?
Yeah, indoor plumbing. So, I actually want to jump in on something here because I think it relates to an issue that we've had as a long-term trend in housing markets is the decline in the willingness of homeowners to actually build up sweat equity and do work on their homes. And so I did hear something encouraging at a Wichita roundtable in response to the increase in interest rates and lack of affordability and what that was doing to first-time home buyers. And they had several realtors that indicated they had home buyers, first-time buyers, that were now thinking of the more traditional buy an older home that needed some work, that, those are the ones that tend to sit. Let's go ahead and take it. We're going to get it at a relatively good price here because I can get into it. I know that I'm going to have to do a lot of work to it to get that up, but I'll do that over the next 4 or 5 years. I'll build my sweat equity and then I can move up. That traditional starter home idea. And I don't know, maybe Flint Hills Technical College here, we can, instead of training, we can't train enough of the carpenters and the electricians and the plumbers, but maybe we could train up more homeowners to do a lot of that work themselves. And then they could be building and rehabbing all these old properties that we have if we're just willing to spend the time doing it. Maybe that's a pipe dream. Jeff, I didn't give you a chance to answer Becca's question.
That's a big difference. When I first got into this, there were a lot more people that were willing to buy a house and flip it and work on it themselves. And I've done this for a few decades now, and those people are very few and very far away that have the skills today. I will say, I agree with you though, I am seeing an upsurgence. We had 2 young men come in here that were into real estate yesterday from Emporia High School to shadow us yesterday. And when I asked them if they were both thinking of real estate, they said no, but we're interested in it. One of them wants to work for Evergy, and one of them wants to work doing sheetrocking. And I said, really? And I said, why the sheetrock? He says, because I know guys that do it, they make a lot of money, and I wouldn't have to pay to go to college. No offense to the college people in here. But it's encouraging to hear that. And then I have a niece that just got married in their early 20s, and she married a guy that's studying to be an electrician. So I have hope that maybe we've kind of realized, with all due respect to college degrees, that laborers are important.
And then they'll come back and get their business degree because they will have started a new business and they'll have 30 employees and they'll need those skills in order to manage that. But let's do it one step at a time.
As far as Madison goes, yeah, if you build it, they will come, is corny but true. But the problem is you got to be able to build it. And the work center here in Emporia, we're having troubles getting people to come here to build it. So when you get further and further out, if they'll do it, it'll cost a little bit more money. So now you're competing on them coming, and then you got to charge more. And if they can't work from home and they got to pay the gas prices lately to come and go, and it's further, then that's another hurdle you got to jump. It's not impossible.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
You got the last word because we're almost out of time. Go ahead.
It's really important to me because it's where I live. But some people have been talking about micro homes instead of doing bigger homes in these areas because they're more cost effective. Have you seen any of that happening around here? Is that something that people are actually doing?
So Emporia has always been very conservative in regard to, changing the way we look at real estate and innovation really, as far as new ways to build homes and talked about quite frequently. We put a brand new subdivision in and got criticized for the type of siding we were using on almost $500,000 homes. So imagine bringing in a container home or something along those lines, which I think they make great sense and provide, especially if you have a workforce that becomes more transient, and you're providing options where they can stay here for shorter amounts of time, then I think it could be a great solution.
I'll say, Becca, that the place where tiny home type things have really taken off and where they are making sense is places where you have really, really, really high land costs. And so you're trying to find ways to put housing units in with as little a land footprint. And that's not our problem here in Kansas. We got land. Yeah. Yeah. So, well, thank you all very much. Thank you very much to Jamie and Jeff for being here today.